Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here. And today I want to talk about Israel's war on 6 fronts. Essentially, the news is reporting 5 fronts, but we're going to talk about front number 6 as well. And this obviously is a huge, huge thing. If you are not keeping up with the news on Israel, obviously all of this stems from the October 7th, 2023 attacks by Hamas on Israel. And obviously there's a huge history that goes back forever, thousands of years, if you will, here. But I want to focus on the facts on the ground. And so, with that, as always, I want to start with the ground rules for this video. First things first, this is not political. If you're watching this for the record, you are seeing a PowerPoint presentation. If you're listening to this, I highly recommend you go to my YouTube channel, or if you're on the radio, obviously here we are. But I also recommend looking at my slides as well, as I've got a lot of visuals for you. But this is not political. I do not care what your political stance is. I am not adjudicating Israel, Hamas, or any of the others that I'm about to talk about here. Your opinions are your own. These are the facts on the ground. And that is exactly what it is. The facts on the ground as of September 23rd of 2024, 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time, GMT -5. If more stuff comes out after that time, it's not in this video slash podcast slash radio segment. On top of it, all images in this presentation, if you are watching this, are courtesy of the Daily Mail, who had a pretty decent write-up, but really good imagery that, quite frankly, I wanted to share with all of you. And so with that, let's talk about the 5 front war that is in the news. And quite frankly, you have a lot of different groups that intelligence communities around the world believe are backed by Iran. Basically, Iran appears to be funneling money, weapons, and logistical support to these organizations. Iran, obviously not a fan of the United States as well, since back when President Trump essentially ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani of the Quds Brigade, which essentially was carried out as reported by the news and by President Trump at that time. And obviously, Iran has been no friend of Israel's as well. And so basically, what we have in terms of combatants are essentially Hezbollah. As you know, there has been pager and walkie-talkie attacks. We're going to talk about those things as well. But a ground war essentially has been started as Israel has been bombing rather relentlessly in the aftermath of that pager and walkie-talkie attack, which I actually did a whole presentation on as well the other day. So obviously that's a huge one. Actually, as I was traveling, on top of it, you've got Hamas. Hamas, obviously, the belligerents at the October 7 to 2023 attack, and obviously the retaliation by the Israeli Defense Forces and intelligence services in Gaza and other places where the Palestinians, as essentially led by Hamas, and again, not getting political here, but that's been a war zone as it's pushed towards Egypt. On top of it, we have the Houthis just south of Saudi Arabia, sitting in Yemen. By all accounts in intelligence, they are also basically causing disruptions backed by Iran. They have been actually shooting at naval vessels and cargo vessels in the Gulf, as well as now launching missiles and rockets at Israel, obviously with the capability to fly over Saudi Arabia straight into Israel. And then, of course, Iran, which obviously, as I've been mentioning here, intelligence services are saying are essentially backing all of these. And then essentially you've got Iraqi and Syrian militias that once again appear to be backed by the Shia in Iran, who are also launching this attack as well. And so by virtue of that, these are the combatants. Now, if you have an argument on Iran backing these or saying they're not or whatever, again, this is what intelligence is telling us. These are the facts on the ground as we know them. If more facts come out, here we are. Now, with that, let's talk about some of the stats of the major combatants here. And obviously, Israel being essentially surrounded, well, one side on the sea and surrounded by belligerents now, basically to their east, south, and north. Essentially, what we have here is 670,000 Israeli Defense Forces, all of which, from what I understand, have been called up. Not to mention, they've got rather advanced weaponry and fighting, a lot of it essentially purchased from the Americans, as well as others as well. And by virtue of that, on their border, you've got Hezbollah. Again, we believe they're backed by Iran. These are the ones that suffered the walkie-talkie and pager attacks. and they've obviously had skirmishes since well before then on the border, as Hezbollah has been gearing up essentially to want to basically push Israel into the sea. They have somewhere between 25 to 5,000 combatants, and they also have access to older, more antiquated equipment, tanks, planes. They also have rockets as well. Israeli has a rather modern defensive capability called Iron Dome against rockets and missiles that has been pretty effective, but no defense is perfect. And then, of course, Iran itself. Iran has raised an army of almost 1.2 million. They've got MiG, Russian-made MiG fighters and all of that. So while they have tanks, rockets, and planes, they are also less advanced than the Israeli Defense Force, which is one of the most modern fighting forces on the planet right now. That's simply a fact. And so these are the big ones. And obviously, you've got the Houthis shooting rockets, but they are geographically separated right now. And the reason why I'm throwing Iran in here is because Iran would have a path essentially to Israel through some of these groups and friendly nations, as militias, like in Syria, for example, would essentially allow troop movement of Iran through. And Syria is one of those oddballs. And if you remember, under President Obama, with the Red Line and all of that, there's some major fighting in Syria, and a multitude of forces from moderate to extremists. Everybody from Russia, ISIS, Iran, the United States was involved in that. So obviously, this is a huge one as well. And so this is essentially what we believe Iran is funding per intelligence. And so this is the five front. You've got Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, basically another sect of Hezbollah as well, sitting in Iraq, and the National Defense Forces of Syria, all of which, again, no fans of Israel, and that's not in dispute whatsoever. That's simply a fact. But this is essentially what Israel is facing right now. And Israel, has been essentially one to strike first. The Six-Day War back in 1967, if I recall the year correctly, they hit first of a combined force against Egypt, Iraq, and some others. And so by virtue of that, Israel is taking a very pro-war stance, and the Netanyahu government has been a pretty hardline government in terms of zero tolerance. And so they are willing to fight, and they are expanding the war right now by attacking Hezbollah in Lebanon. That is the latest front. So this is the five-front war that essentially the news is reporting on. This is the kinetic war that we are seeing: rockets, bombs, tanks, guns, death, destruction, and all of that. But what about the sixth front? And the sixth front, if you're a longtime listener and follower of mine, know that it's cyber warfare and disinformation. The technological side of this war has been going on 24/7, 365, way before October 7th. And obviously, it has absolutely exploded. The cyber attacks are nonstop by basically all parties. I don't care if it's the IDF, Israeli intelligence, Mossad, or it's any one of the combatants against Israel in any form that I'm talking about, not to mention the Russians have very good alliances, and they've got a very excellent and professional Russian intelligence hacking and disinformation team and systems within that country that they are more than happy to lend to their ally, Iran. So this obviously has been a huge thing. On top of it, the disinformation has been absolutely insane, whether it's false troop movements, whether it's calls of or fake articles on surrenders, all this kind of stuff has been absolutely crazy. And essentially the goal of that is to destabilize society, whether it's Israeli society, Lebanese society, whatever it is. This is obviously a huge issue. And again, it's going back and forth. I'm not pointing the finger at any of them at this point, but we have to be aware of this. We see these disinformation around the world. Here in the United States, during the 2024 election, we've got Trump v. Harris, or Harris v. Trump, whatever. We see disinformation left and right, but it is nonstop rampant in Israel and basically the countries against Israel, just as it is in Ukraine, as Russia continues to try and invade Ukraine, which obviously, as you know, I'm not a fan of. And so with that, the pager and walkie-talkie attacks were basically, I think, a blueprint for how you have a sophisticated technological attack that eventually turns into kinetic warfare. This is essentially a cyber attack that was run over 3G and 4G cellular networks to basically hit these pagers that were obviously packed with explosive to start basically murder and mayhem across all of Hezbollah's terrorist network. This also had the net effect, essentially, of shutting down terrorist networks around the world, as the terrorist networks tend to talk to each other, but now all technology is suspect. So the psychological war behind that, not just the actual physical death and mayhem that was wrought by these, as people were throwing out everything in their area, from baby monitors to telephones to cell phones to anything that could potentially be bombed, in Hezbollah's supply chain. And this, I think, is a blueprint of what we are going to see of how actual technological warfare turns into kinetic war. And so this is going to be a huge thing that we are now going to start seeing more and more of, because quite frankly, I think the Israelis, and they're not taking credit for it, but the world believes it's Israel. I think they just set the blueprint. And with that, welcome to the future, because I think that this is what we are going to continuously see. I don't care who the world leaders are, but we're going to constantly have some kind of fighting going on. We've had African fighting going on for quite some time. Look at Boko Haram in Nigeria, Al Shabaab, on the Horn of Africa, and a whole bunch of others. And now it's obviously spreading. And when you have a very modern, sophisticated, and well-equipped army that, quite frankly, believes that they are fighting for their absolute survival, as their neighbors, as they believe, want to push them into the sea, again, not getting political, they're going to start ramping up war like this, because they're going to defend themselves, just as these groups are going to do everything they can to stop the spread of Israel as well. So this is essentially what we are seeing here. It's a huge, huge problem that we've got. This isn't going anywhere. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're watching it on the YouTube channel, please subscribe to me. But this is obviously a huge thing, and I'll keep you guys up to date on this. But this is a 6-front war that Israel now fights. And quite frankly, can they win? Well, if history has shown us anything, it's that, yeah, they probably can. And we're going to see what happens. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And if you're watching the videos, you can see all the links right there of how you can get to me. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private. Thanks, everybody. And this is just such a crazy one.